everyone. Today I am taking on the age-old battle of plotting versus pantsing. Though, spoiler alert, I am team pantsing all the way. And since I therefore don't plot or really outline, I am the last person who's going to tell you how you should plot or outline. So really, this is a pantsing video. What is the difference between plotting versus pantsing? It is exactly what it sounds like. If you are a plotter, you plot everything ahead of time, you write an outline, and you write to that outline. But if you're a pantser, you fly by the seat of your pants. For some people, that means literally making up everything as you go along. But for others, there's kind of a hybrid style there. Some people call it plotsing, but I prefer to use other in-between terms to talk about it. Like I said, I'm a pantser, but I definitely do some plotting and planning beforehand. I just 100% can't write an outline to save my life. I've tried outlining stories in the past, and I found that I just grew bored with the thing that I was outlining. And so even if I made progress on the outline, then I didn't want to write the book. It wasn't until I threw the outline out the window that I successfully pushed through a draft and completed a book. That's when I discovered there was a term for this, pantsing, and it changed my life. I'm so glad I embraced this writing style, and it's why I like to tell everyone about it. If you've been trying to write a book and you've been outlining like a good boy or girl and it just hasn't been working, maybe you're secretly a pantser. Try throwing caution to the wind and just going for it. Another way of putting it is architects versus gardeners. This is the way that George R.R. Martin delineates between the two types. Architects have a blueprint and they follow that blueprint to build a building. Their building is the story. Whereas gardeners plant seeds and watch things grow. Though, of course, as a writer, you're not really watching. You still have to actually write the book. But you've planted the seeds in the beginning. That's like the bare minimum of planning, like knowing who your characters are and some of your world building and the main plot arc of your book. And you plant those seeds and then you let a beautiful garden grow. I love the architects versus gardeners metaphor because gardening definitely feels like how I work on books. Another style I've heard used for the in-between of pantsers, the plantsers, is called headlights writing. That's also definitely something I do. I know just enough about what's going to happen in the story that, if I were driving a car, it would be what I could see with the headlights. I know generally what's going to happen one scene or one chapter ahead, and I write towards that next thing that I can see. Now, I know pantsing might sound terrifying, and at first it is. Writing without a firm plan, it sounds so counterintuitive, especially if you come from a background like I do. I'm a Ravenclaw, and in all other aspects of my life, I love planning. I love spreadsheets and schedules and knowing things ahead of time and meticulously planning out everything. So it was a total surprise when I realized that wasn't my creative process for writing books. A plotting tip that works well for pantsers in my experience that really helped me, I got from Jim Butcher from his live journal from over a decade ago. The posts are still there, and I'll link down in the description to the one that really helped me. Essentially, you take your big plot beats and you plot them on a bell curve, like so. Think of that as the arc of your story. At the beginning, you're gonna put, main character wakes up and goes to school. Though not really, that's really not how you should open a book, but just as an example. Along the arc, you'll put things like the inciting incident, and it'll all lead up to the midpoint, and then in the falling action, you'd fill in anything that you know is definitely gonna happen. Typically, I know what my inciting incident is, and usually the midpoint. I don't always know the end, but when I do, I kind of put that at the end of the plot graph so I know what I'm writing towards. As long as I have 3 or 4 beats to write towards, that's enough for me to pin a story on. So I literally take a piece of paper, I draw a bell curve, and I put my big moments on there. Another method that I know the author V.E. Schwab uses is she writes the end first. You can pants a novel, but as long as you know what happens at the end of it, you know what you're writing towards. So if starting at the end sounds like something that might work for you, I advise trying it. Personally, I can't do that because my endings tend to change, and I don't know my characters until I've written at least 30,000 words of them. Another method you can try, and I talked about it in my starting and finishing a novel video, is writing a quick and dirty draft. It's actually really similar to the plot draft, where you know your key plot beats and like big scenes. Often those are the scenes that you have in your mind that you know you want to have happen and you're excited to write. So give yourself permission to write them. Write the big scenes you know are going to happen, and that'll be your dirty first draft. Then you can go through and your second draft will be filling in all the things that come between. Before you start, know your primary conflict and character beats. Where does your character start and where do they need to end? You can even work backwards. Who is your character at the end of the story, and how should you alter them so that they're a different person at the beginning? Then you can fill in the dots of what happens to them to turn them into that person. Do some world building ahead of time. Not all the world building. In fact, digging into world building and doing too much research can just be a procrastination tool. You could spend months world building and not write a single word. But I do think it's helpful to think about the logic of your world, the basics of how things work. I like to think about governments and social services. What's the fabric of the society and how things work? How do class and gender work? What kind of jobs do people have? What job does your main character have? Or what jobs do their parents do? I find that it's easier to pants if I have a logic system to my world build. But the awesome thing about flying by the seat of your pants is if you come up with a really cool idea midway through your draft, you can just twist the logic and change it so that it fits. I've definitely done that. Also, that's what revision is for. One of the reasons I love revision so much is that it gives me the ability to just let go when I'm drafting. I don't have to worry about the story being perfect or exactly what a finished product would be. I can just write where my imagination takes me and then fix it all later. When you're pantsing and you get stuck, think about introducing new conflict. One of my favorite devices is having another character interrupt my characters. And from there, I've often had to brainstorm brand new characters who threw new wrenches into my plot and made it way more interesting. Often, this is where you come up with even better antagonists than you had originally imagined. I have definitely changed my antagonist midstream before, and it ended up being a better book. I know I said I didn't have much to contribute to the area of outlining, but I will say that if you're a plotter, embrace it. Outline to your heart's content, but don't get too lost in your outline. As you're writing, if something comes up and you need to deviate from your outline, take a risk and try it. Often it's the things we come up with as we're plotting that make our books special. Characters will start to take over and whisper in your ear and take you down all new paths and directions. And the discovery of writing is the fun part. And I think you can have that fun and experience that discovery whether you're a plotter or a pantser. And even though I'm not a plotter or an outliner, I'm going to talk all about plot beats and structure in a future video. Because it is important to internalize these things so you can write cleaner stories. Even though I don't outline, I do write to plot beats and I tend to follow 3-act structure. Just to give you an example of how pantsing has completely changed my work, in my book Brightly Burning, there is an overarching conspiracy plot. And no, it's not the one that you think it is. About 60% into my draft, I came up with something completely separate that never happened in Jane Eyre, and I just went with it. If I'd outlined, I'm not sure I would have ever had that light bulb moment, and now the backbone of the world and the conflict in my book is completely different. So what's your writing style? I'd love to hear more about it in the comments. Honestly, I don't think we're all strictly plotters or strictly pantsers. I think we have our own weird ways of writing books, and you can come up with all sorts of cute names for them. Ultimately, all that matters is that you can get the work done and you enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe. And if you decide to join Team Pantser, let me know in the comments.